Christian Amato, Artistic Director of the Theater Project. We're here on the set of Bitch, our current production, at the historic Players Theater. I'm joined today by Sean Pomposello, playwright of Bitch, to discuss our next production, Barbicide, which we've been developing since this past December. We first presented Barbicide through a reading series entitled Universal Monsters, which exposed 11 of Sean Pomposello's plays in December 2011 and premiered 4 wonderful stage pieces. So Sean, what exactly is Barbicide about?
Barbicide is essentially it's a revenge story. A barber from Flushing, Queens, from Fleet Street in Flushing, Queens, gets sent away to prison for 20 years by a bigwig mafiosa, and upon his release, tries to exact some revenge on him. And it may sound slightly familiar. The story is meant to be an adaptation, or a reimagining, actually, of Sweeney Todd.
When you plan a play, what comes to mind? What special considerations go towards planning a production from start to finish as a writer?
You know, it really depends on the play. This play is a little different. This one I planned. I have a history, as you recall, in our Universal Monsters reading series. I have a history of writing a lot of monologues, and so I wanted to try a full-length monologue, essentially. So the plan for this was not only to write it in monologue form, but also to limit the amount of characters and have actors playing multiple characters. So kind of a less is more approach. You know, very scant direction in terms of set and style, but really focusing on the words and the story, and trying to steep as much flavor and tonality and information in the dialogue itself.
What makes you lean so heavily towards writing monologues?
I'm a dialogue, character-driven playwright. And maybe for good or for bad. I mean, plot to me matters, but not nearly as much as character, and I develop my stories through character. So for me, more than wardrobe, more than even the cast member, to me it's what they're saying that a theater goer responds to. So the more opportunity I have to use words and dialogue to craft a world, the better. So for me, monologue is something that I'm familiar with and comfortable with, and it's maybe a little bit of a crutch, but it's something I like to work with.
What's interesting is that you say that wardrobe doesn't typically matter as much. However, Barbicide is a piece that
it's a period piece.
Relies really heavily on the costuming of the show.
Well, it really does, but the truth of the matter is this is a rare instance of writing something, for me, writing something with a collaborator, a director, from the beginning. You know, so in this instance, I knew that we were having discussions, you and myself. I knew that we were having some very lengthy discussions about, first, the idea of it, this notion of reimagining Sweeney Todd in a sort of mafioso world. Yeah. But in those discussions, I began to recognize that there's a shorthand, and I don't need to get into those details because we both are on the same page. So it allowed me to think story and think character and think language first, and not have to focus on that stuff.
As a playwright, do you find it easier or more difficult to work with a collaborator, or is this your first time really trying that out?
It's not completely the first time. It's the first time I've done it from the outset of a story. But I like it because I think of myself as a collaborator. I mean, first and foremost, I like to have access to production transcending the written word, just to ensure that what I've written kind of comes across on stage, and to be allowed that access. To me, I think always benefits the piece. I guess it depends on the playwright too.
Yeah.
You know, so, but we've sort of been working on this for a month, and so right from the seed of an idea, you and I were on the same page about what we were trying to say and how we were going to say it. So for me, that's the optimal sort of the optimal sort of rapport that you can have in theater, I think.
Barbicide is an adaptation, of course, of Sweeney Todd, but it envisions itself and it comes across more as a reimagining. What was your process like in writing that script?
Well, you know, the story is steeped in crime fiction, you know, so it's essentially taking, you know, a classic story and setting it in Queens, New York in 1964, in the midst of the New York World's Fair. And, you know, given that period and given the fact that my character, his name is Tedesco, not Todd, has been away in prison for 20 years, the world has changed for him. Since he went away to into prison, the entire mafia world has changed significantly, and he's sort of a man out of time. So, given that, not just the structure of it in terms of monologue, but given the notion of it being taking place in that period, the language is more crime fiction, more kind of staccato, sort of Jim Thompson kind of tough guy dialogue.
So you set the play in Queens, and what's funny is Bitch was centered in the Bronx, and a lot of your plays do center in the Bronx or the outskirts of it, and that's because you grew up in the Bronx, which is a reason why I identify with the play so much, being a Bronx native myself. But what was the reason for setting this one in Queens?
I mean, quite honestly, if there was a Fleet Street in the Bronx, I would have written it in the Bronx. But so there's a Fleet Street in Flushing, New York, and it just so happens that, you know, the Chicago World's Fair is there at that same time. So it was sort of a confluence of a lot of different things happening at the same time. So it made sense for it to be Queens. And I did, to be honest with you, I did enter into it a little left-footed because I'm so much more comfortable with the Bronx than I am Queens, having been raised there myself.
An interesting concept that you fused through the script, and something that you briefly mentioned a little while ago, is your use of actors and having them all play numerous roles. What influenced you in terms of writing that into the script?
Yeah, a couple things. The first thing is, which is sort of the bare bones, is I wrote this in the midst of our Universal Monsters reading series. And in that series, we had the cast of Bitch reading all the pieces I had written. And sometimes in some plays, particularly longer and bigger ones, we had actors playing several parts. So I'm sure that informed my writing, because I was writing this at the same time, and made me think about the potential for having one actor really push himself and play several parts. I also was writing it very bare bones in terms of the style. So there's almost no direction. It's straight monologue. It may as well be prose, because it's written like almost like a novel. So it's just in first person from all these different characters. So I was just really essentially doing what a lot of actors have told me, which is being very sort of sadistic, because I make actors do a lot of work.
That's true. I mean, you put your actors on stage with a 4-page monologue.
Yeah.
Which most actors are thankful for, because not many people write like that.
Yeah, some are thankful for it. You know, in this business, and invariably though, we're asked. You know, we get into a festival or we get an opportunity to stage something, and it's always like this. So you're always limited a little bit in terms of the time that you have to prepare, and that's an actor's nightmare. You know, to try to absorb 4 pages of thick monologue. I mean, it's even changed the format of my scripts where I have to space and a half my dialogue because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely there's a side of me that really loves actors and loves to see them stretch, and so I like to give them an opportunity to make me as an audience member, you know, be utterly wowed by the performance.
So you were just talking about how Barbicide sort of is influenced by prose. And what's interesting about the play is that it's a hybrid form of theater, combining a monologue play, beat poetry, and even highly stylized character interaction melded with direct audience address. What inspired you to create such a unique literary environment for a production?
Well, I mean, I've mentioned this to you before. I'm definitely more inspired by novelists than I am playwrights. I mean, there are playwrights that I absolutely, find interesting. But for me, most of what has turned me on and made me a writer has been, novels. And so, in this instance, I mean, I remember texting you when I was coming up with the idea for this thing. And my idea was that it was, if you would imagine Sweeney Todd to be written by Mario Puzo and Jim Thompson, or Jack Kerouac.
Yeah.
And so that kind of log line, however ridiculous it might sound, allowed me an opportunity to wrap my head around this very kind of unique sort of method of storytelling. So that's kind of what informed the piece and made it have the voice that it has.
No, what's also really funny is the fact that we've been stuck here at the Players Theater for about 3 months now, working throughout a majority of your plays. And the funny thing is this area was the area of the Beat generation, down the block and across the street.
Right downstairs in MacDougal Street. Yeah.
Exactly. Bob Dylan got his start here, and across the street, and next door at the Minetta Tavern and at the Village Gaslight, those were Jack Kerouac's haunts.
Yeah.
Do you think that influenced sort of?
It may very well. I mean, I believe you the same way. I am a true New Yorker and love the history of New York, and even being a New Yorker, I'm not blind to all the landmarks that we step over every day. Every day coming into rehearsal, I'll walk around the streets and I'll remember reading about stuff that occurred right on those streets. So to me, it is sort of a walk down sort of this literary past.
Well, thank you, Sean, for being with us here today. I'm doing this little talk back for our web viewers. But Barbicide will see its full-length developmental reading this April here in the West Village. And while we wait for that, please make sure to friend us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+, and also watch our videos on YouTube for more behind-the-scenes sneak